To the rest of the world, the earthquake disaster in Christchurch, New Zealand began on February the 22nd. However, to the inhabitants of our small South Island city, the roller coaster life we now live started with a quake of magnitude 7.1 on September the 4th, and you can see that. That was captured at the moment of that quake. Since that date, we have experienced more than 10,000 aftershocks, including the disastrous quake on February the 22nd, which killed 185 people and left many thousands homeless and traumatised. More than 181,000 homes were damaged or destroyed. I want to talk for a moment about the people that we've all been talking about today, those who are most affected. And before I do that, I want to put myself in context, because Elaine started her speech this morning by putting her in context. And I think it's important for you to know where I come from in this. I've been privileged to be the manager of Better Women's Refuge now for 8 years. I was previously a school principal. So if you start getting restless and bored, watch out. I'll probably throw a curly question or two in there and there'll be a test at lunchtime. I accidentally fell into this work in family violence, as you do, when I had a very severe back injury and wasn't able to walk for a while and couldn't continue my career. And it's been my life work since then. But prior to that, I had been in an extremely abusive marriage for a very long time, in fact 21 years. And I have been the victim or the survivor of many physical attacks, including broken bones, and sexual abuse as well. Now I say that so that you know that when I speak about the experience of our women, I also speak from my own experience, from my heart, as well as from my understanding. Well, you know, we have to be prepared, don't we? Let me bring you back to the people who have been most affected in our experience. Previous victims of sexual abuse and family violence in their homes were the first people who contacted us after the major earthquakes, and that trend has continued. They talk about being terribly frightened because this violence which is happening to them is happening in the context of their homes. And in fact, the September earthquake was in the early hours of the morning when it was dark and they were in their beds. So you can begin to see that that was a group who were terribly traumatised. Single mums and their families have become our hidden victims. And more we're seeing effects not just on these women, but on their children and in the context of their whole everyday lives. Young children can't tell us always what's going on for them. My 7-year-old grandson said to me when he first came to stay with me after the big earthquake, "Now my nana," I know when he says that, it means I'm going to be told what to do. "Now my nana, I think it's going to be all right if I sleep on the floor." "Oh, okay, darling, shall we put a mattress down there?" "Oh, yes." "Now my nana, I need," "What, darling?" "I need a bottle of water, a torch, and my boots, please." And that was his survival plan. He knew that he needed some stuff, something for on his feet, some water, and a torch. And so at 6, he was then, he had his own survival plan already worked out. Pretty impressive, but pretty scary as well. No. I'll talk to you a wee bit later about adolescence and what we've discovered. I took the centre photograph there of those young women. I stopped when I was trying to get away from the February 11th mess. And those girls were just absolutely distraught. They didn't know what to do, where to go, who to talk to, couldn't get their cell phones to work. And in the end I took them back to their school because it made sense to get them somewhere where they were at least known and could be supported. People who are disabled, particularly young people and the elderly, these are the vulnerable in our society. And we've talked about that a huge amount today, but we need to keep remembering it. Their voices aren't heard. Our voices need to be heard for them. There's our sequence of earthquakes. The red line is our crisis line. And I did this, well actually one of my staff did this, when we were trying to make some sense of the pattern and what was happening in family violence in Christchurch, because unlike some places, we have some statistics, which is fantastic. We, in our agency, are responsible for processing all of the police family violence response reports, and we've been doing that ever since the first earthquake. So we have our own set of fairly incontrovertible statistics, but only about reported events, we know that. So we have seen an increase which at times is 30% more than the baseline, at times is 67% more than the baseline, at times is 11% more than the baseline. We're finding it almost impossible to make any sense out of the pattern. But what we are beginning to see through our crisis line is that there is a delay in people contacting and people asking for help. And I think we've been talking about that this morning. What we have seen as an agency is that there is a huge gap between what we are seeing in terms of women seeking help, seeking support, seeking us, and the police reports. And a lot's been talked about that today. Some of our experience was that many police came and helped us from all sorts of different places, and our own systems weren't followed through, so that was one thing that happened. But also that for many police officers who were attending crisis calls of a domestic violence nature at the time, they were not used to doing this crisis work, and very often we would find that the charges laid would be something like willful damage, or trespass, or any common assault, anything other than the domestic violence or family violence situation that was actually facing us. So we've had to do a lot of work around that. We're lucky also that we've got work done by Ros Houghton, who has done research post-disaster right throughout New Zealand over the last few years. So we knew to expect an increase in violence, and we knew to expect some sort of pattern of delay. We just didn't expect it to be as random and as difficult to plan for as it has been. What we know is that there has been a huge increase in numbers of people seeking support. There has been a very high increase in severity of the issues coming forward. We know that many of our previous clients were the first ones to approach us in the initial stages seeking more support, and we know that sometimes their calls to us have been for the basic survival things. They contacted us because they trusted us. They knew we were an agency that would listen to them. And we've taken that very seriously, because part of what we've heard all through this morning so far has been that people can't trust and they don't know who to ask. So for us, the fact that our clients could come and did come forward to us with the most basic needs sometimes was important. What we are beginning to see a pattern of in our situation is that with the ongoing and continuing and difficult multitude of aftershocks, and they still haven't stopped. We had a 4.6, I think it was Monday night. So we are still having these aftershocks. They're still there. We're still in our disaster. Our disaster hasn't stopped. And I'm not meaning that other disasters stop at the time of the event, but for us the event hasn't yet stopped. So it's quite difficult to make this all work. And I know this sounds confusing, believe me it is, when we're living it. So what we're finding is the best source of information for us, and the research that informs us the best actually, is research that suggests that natural disasters of repetitive and chronic nature are causing stress such as that caused in wartime. So let's talk about our women and children for a minute or two. How did this affect them? Well, we've been a lot today down the track of looking at what has happened to women. We're seeing many effects of the double whammy of family violence and the earthquake, and both of an ongoing nature. We know that women downplayed their experience of domestic violence. We know that many couples who've been apart for a significant period of time due to previous family violence reunited. And with that reuniting came serious issues. We know that serious issues around access and custody of children have reared their heads, particularly where the home of one of the parents has been damaged. And we know where several non-custodial parents petitioned the courts and to get custody of the children because of concerns around their education and their health. We know women were unable to access support services, medical care, counsellors, transport was difficult. And we know that this made women, particularly those bringing up single children on their own, more and more vulnerable. I well recall the day when some of our helpers came back with that shell-shocked look on their face. And we sat down at the table, as we do a lot of doing, sitting down, talking, debriefing, thinking things through. And two of our staff had just been to a household in Waitangi, which is one of the most affected suburbs, and found a woman with her 5 children sitting on a couch in a home with no power, no running water, no sewage. The children had no clothes and they had run out of food and water. Now they found her by accident because she had been a previous client and we'd gone back to check on everyone. And when somebody talked to her and asked her what was happening, she had just run out of steam. She had coped now for 10 days in those circumstances with those children. It was a 3.5 kilometre walk for her to go and get water. She couldn't do it. So we need to remember these people. Let me talk to you now about some major trends we've found. The rise in the number of child v parent family violence incidents is the surprise for us in all of the things that have happened. We have discovered that in December 2011, we've looked back and done a statistical analysis that child v parent violence was second only to intimate partner violence. And it was 24% of the total violence cases. We've analysed over 5,000 cases now, so we're starting to see a very serious trend in the rise of adolescent violence. It's really hard to understand that. Some people today have helped us to understand that a bit further, but what we're definitely seeing is that this reflects the children's experience. The change dynamics in the home, they talk to us, the kids talk to us about the parents being clingy and afraid to let them go. There's no power. The phone lines aren't working. Dear God, they can't play their games, they can't go on Facebook. There's nowhere for them to go. The sports clubs are all closed, half the schools are closed. The ones that are open have got staggered hours. This is last year, this is changing as we speak. There's much more drinking at home and with neighbours instead of controlled environments. That affects the kids. And what we're finding is that families sharing limited space with no water and no sewage also puts huge pressure. These young boys, mainly boys, are resorting to violence in ways that we've just heard described, actually. Thank you. And your talking today has helped me understand more what's happening with our young boys. What is challenging for us now is what do we do about that? How do we support our future young men? Because I believe that when we're talking about domestic violence, we're talking about our families and we're talking about our future. And for me, those young people are our future. And it's absolutely incumbent upon us now to do something with that knowledge because we've got the knowledge. I know. I'm watching. So, can I just bring you to what happened to us as an agency? Because one of the things that we've been doing and what we'll do further today is tease out how we can go forward and how we can plan. So let me tell you about our service. Our safe house was damaged in 2010 and the client staying had to self-evacuate because we couldn't get to them. The house, which is owned by Housing New Zealand, hasn't been repaired to date, and it took us 3 months to find another safe house, which is much smaller. We lost our children's therapy room and our associated office. Many of our workers struggled with damage to their own homes and disruption to their families. In February, 20% of our staff and trustees lost a loved one in the quake, and it's taken us a huge amount to get rid of that. These pictures are all of things that mean something The candle is the one that we burned for the people that we lost when we loved. The houses are houses of our staff members. So they've helped to put this together. This is them. When we talked about this conference, I asked them how they were feeling now compared to what they were feeling then. And they still said this: we are only just coping, and in fact sometimes we dread the phone going, as we don't think we could cope with hearing any more stories about the earthquakes. They've spoken about having no motivation, about personal issues overwhelming them, and about all their emotions being involved and absorbed in just surviving. So, where to from here? We've learned that trauma doesn't come with labels on it. It's not easy to understand trauma, but we need to. We all need to. We need to understand that trauma doesn't sit in our heads and go, oh, this was a trauma caused by a childhood experience. This was a trauma perhaps caused by a nice car accident that we had. We know that trauma builds up, and when more trauma happens, it excites that reptilian centre of our brains and causes us to react in that fight and flight way. But we need to understand what that means for the women and children we work with. I just want to finish with a couple of comments about what we need to continue our work. Whoops, oh dear, I'm not good at this. This is us now, this is what it looks like today. What we've gained the knowledge of is that volunteers are a critical part of our recovery. They need to be valued. They need to be accepted as a legitimate response by a society to its own needs. Bureaucrats need to accept this and help them, not hinder them in their work. Being affiliated to a national collective was an enormous help to us post-earthquake and has really kept us going. The most critical factor for us in being able to maintain the services was the relationships we had with other NGOs and government departments before the quake. The level of trust that we had already established made all of the difference. A couple of things that I'd like to recommend. We've talked about how important it is for women to have spaces that are safe for them. We need to recommend that small, in some cases women-only shelters be set up for victims of natural disasters where it's possible, so that women have somewhere to feel safe. We've asked that government departments make emergency funding immediately available, but we also want to say something about that. We'd like to say that in the middle of a disaster or a series of disasters, or even immediately following that, is not the right time to ask us, government departments, not-for-profit agencies, to participate in blue sky planning for the future. We're all completely overwhelmed by the task at hand, and still are, I suppose, to a point, and we found it very daunting and disrespectful to be told by our Ministry of Social Development that we were in the middle of a wonderful opportunity to change how things were done in the social service sector. Last paragraph. In conclusion, over the last 18 months, we've cried, we've laughed, we've been terrified, and we've been heartened. We've learned lessons, and then we've had to learn them all over again. We've thrown out all our preconceived notions of strength, resiliency, and independence. We've learned to get up and carry on. Thank you.